Hello everyone. We're joined today by Dr. Joshua Fan, who is a professor of world history at UTEP, and he's an historian of Chinese history. And so today, Dr. Fan, thank you for being with us. We're going to talk a little bit about globalization. So, Dr. Fan, how would you define globalization?
Globalization is a process of interaction and integration among people, government, and corporation later on over vast space around the world, basically.
Okay.
It's a relatively recent term. The definition isn't really fixed until the earliest late 1970s.
Okay. And so if the definition is fixed around that time, is globalization itself, those processes, is that new?
Personally, I would say no. Depending on your definition of globalization, for economists, for people who specialize in discipline that's more contemporary focused, their definition of globalization will have to include exchange or integration of the entire globe. So if you use that definition, then the answer is probably since after World War II. However, if you're only looking at integration exchange over large areas among different people, then you can push back thousands of years. Just to give you two kind of pre-modern famous example, the Silk Roads, for example, that cuts across Central Asia, was able to link East Asia, mostly China, across today's Iran, Persia back then, all the way to the coast, east coast of the Mediterranean Ocean. So that's around 2nd century CE. So that's a process that went back 2,000 years. By the year about 1000, then you have what's commonly referred to as the India-Ocean Exchange, where the volume of trade and exchange along the India-Ocean basin now kind of outstrip the volume of trade and contact along the Silk Roads. So that's about the year 1000, continue to grow. The next turning point will be around 1500 when the Europeans, of course, linked up the Americas with Eurasia.
Right.
So.
Okay. And so are there any ways in which these processes or globalization, to use that term, are there any ways that has changed over time?
Definitely has changed over time. And the pattern has basically stayed consistent. The major difference within the last couple of decades is the pace of change. So generally speaking, you could say the globalization process has become farther, faster, cheaper, and deeper. Because advancement in communication and transportation, we can now travel farther around the world, faster, cheaper, and mostly because of communication. Before 20th century, even with contact with faraway places, the local population that's affected are probably mostly the elite. But with communication technology being advanced, everyone have a cell phone, with internet, now it's truly a global integration.
I see.
Everyone is part of it.
I see. And I guess that kind of leads into my last question. I mean, as far as winners and losers, are there people who benefit specifically from globalization? Are there people who don't benefit from it?
Globalization increasingly has become a controversial topic. And there's no easy answer to say who's the winner and who's the loser. Mm-hmm. Proponent of globalization will say globalization allows the government and the people from poor countries to develop economically and to raise their standard of living. And in absolute terms, that is actually true. Opponent of globalization will say primarily it benefits increasingly the multinational corporations and their CEOs and their shareholders disproportionately vis-a-vis their own workers and workers they are outsourcing the factories to in developing world. So to sum up, I would say yes, it benefits everybody, but the gain made because of globalization has not been distributed equally, not even close.
Okay, fascinating. Well, thank you again very much, Dr. Fan, for joining us and for enlightening us a little more about globalization.